Hey guitar players, Ari Koinuma here. So I'm about to bid farewell to my beloved Fractal FM3 and I needed to make this video to remember what playing Fractal was like. Now, will I regret this decision? We'll find out. So I have been a Fractal modeling player for the last probably about 8 years. I started with a X8 and then I upgraded to FM3 about 4 years ago. I loved Fractal unit as far as the sound is concerned. I compared it against other modelers at the time and I really felt that the detail and sort of the authenticity was there. As you know, if you're watching this video, Fractal's user experience is not very easy or intuitive, and the depth of choices that you have to configure Fractal is just always mind-blowing. I have been using Fractal with full range monitors the last year or so when I was gigging, and at first it was really daunting in terms of making changes on the fly during live setting. Although I was getting pretty good at it by middle of last year. But I played a couple gigs and I just stayed somewhat dissatisfied with how things felt and sounded at a gig volume, especially with loud drummer and turning things up. Now, I was using one of the more affordable full-range speakers by Headrush, and I think that's probably the biggest culprit in terms of how things felt. When I listened to the live take that was captured on video, and I heard how it sounded from the audience perspective, I thought it sounded just fine. Nobody complained about my tone. In fact, people thought that I sounded great, but I felt that the tone was a bit strident, had kind of a steely kind of edge to it, and there was just harshness, not necessarily in terms of the sound itself, but in terms of just how when I leaned in, the attack just felt, just the response. I won't get into the journey of going from Fractal to my current tube preamp bass setup, but after I switched to my tube preamp bass setup, I just have not been playing the Fractal, and I have some other backup options, so I decided that it's time to let go of my Fractal. Before I do that, I wanted to just kind of capture what it was like to play my Fractal so that in the future, if I missed modeling and the flexibility, I could look back and just see what it felt like. So today I am playing a model of Fender and Vox AC30 and comparing it against my tube preamp equivalent of that. For Fender, I have Koch 63OD, which is a blackface style preamp, and then for Vox I have Victory Copper, which is a Vox style tube preamp. For cabinet simulation, I am using Fractal's Dynacab with, of course, deluxe reverb and AC30 simulations. And then for my tube preamp setup, I am using Two Notes Genome with, again, deluxe reverb and AC30 type cabs. I also wanted to see what the difference between the tube preamp setup versus Fractal while they're using the same cabinet simulation. So I also have a third setup in which I am using the Fractal as the preamp and power amp simulation, and then going through Two Notes Genome cabs, so that in that case you should be able to hear the difference between the tube preamp and Fractal amp simulation through the same cabinet. So essentially I'm playing same riff 3 times. One of them is the two preamp through the power amp simulation of Two Notes, and then going through the DIN IR cabinet in Genome as well. And then the other one is, of course, Fractal going direct with both the amp simulation and its Dynacab. And then the third one is Fractal, but instead of using the Fractal's cabinet simulation, I turned off the power amp simulation of Two Notes and then just using the DIN IR cabinet in Two Notes. So let's take a listen, and then I'll come back later with my thoughts on what I'm hearing. Firstly, I have to say that this was not meant to be a super duper scientific kind of experiment, and in particular, when it's a fractal against the Two Notes DIN IR cab, I didn't spend a lot of time sort of dialing in the tone, so that one sounds naturally kind of bad in a way. But then I wouldn't use the fractal unit with the Two Notes cab, so I guess that was perhaps not as useful of an option to compare against, unless if I was going to do it super quickly like that. But nevertheless, here's what I think about this. The first thing that I noticed when I started playing more of the tube setup is just the dynamic response of my rig. It's that I heard the kind of details and response that I have never heard in my life, even when I was playing tube amps before I went to Fractal, in that I have not been able to afford, like, for example, really top of the line, boutique tube amps, so it was more on the affordable side. And all tube amps are obviously not the same, right? The kind of detail that I heard back in the more affordable tube amps, I would say was not greater than Fractal. In fact, I thought that the Fractal sounded better. Now, with my current tube setup with preamps from Koch and Victory, I'm hearing all kinds of things that I previously never heard, and all the details and nuances that are coming through, it's just like, wow. To be perfectly honest, it makes me feel very vulnerable, and I feel that I'm much worse player than I thought I was. But the flip side is that if I'm playing this rig, it's gonna make me a better player. because just the dynamic response from my touch is it's just so responsive. And I can see in the waveforms that the tube preamp setup, even through the Two Notes cab simulation, it just has much bigger range. Now I'll have to put in like compressors in the chain, and then if I'm recording other again, lots of other studio compressors and things like that to tame those transients and attack and things like that. But overall, I have to say the experience of playing my new tube-based rig is like the tone feels alive and it feels more demanding. And again, while all the sloppiness and imperfection of my playing comes through, I kind of get excited that playing this rig will make me a better player. Now, the Fractal actually sounds, when I'm listening to the recording, really like close, so close that like I don't know that I'll be able to like differentiate. But the difference in terms of, again, the dynamic response, that is definitely a key differentiator, in that when I'm playing Fractal, there is a sort of a sense of disconnect compared to my tube preamp setup, in that where the tube preamp, when I play and dig in, it just really responds with louder dynamics and just quick response. When I'm doing the same thing with Fractal, it's almost like the cabinet is in a different room, and then you're just listening to the through the studio monitors what the mic is picking up, which is literally true in that Fractal is a modeling unit of model amps and then cabinet being mic'd, the models of cabinets being mic'd, and you're listening to that. Of course, which is the same thing with Two Notes as well, but the preamp being this digital simulation and tube preamp, the response is very different. In recording, does that come through? Not really. So I am not saying that the modeling units are inferior to preamps. In fact, in some ways, it is much easier to play the modeling setup in this case, because it sounds a lot more consistent. It's easier to make it sound consistent, and that is, of course, the beauty of modeling unit, is that you dial in a particular setup and it will sound the same from day to day and from venue to venue. Also, therein lies a problem, is that sounding same is not always the goal either. If I am in this venue or that venue or this situation or that situation, even like, on the day, is it like a very humid day, or if I'm hot or sweaty or what, my fingertips, my body, just I am different day to day, and I sometimes need to make adjustments on the fly to my rig to compensate or sort of react to how I am sounding that day. While I did get eventually better at doing that on the Fractal unit on the fly, the more of the old school setup has limited options and no menus and things like that. So it is a little quicker and intuitive to just turn this knob or that knob and just make adjustments as you go. So when I consider my setup, I do need a range of sounds at my disposal, and so that's why I now have a rig with 3 different tube preamps, and each of those 3 preamps have 2 different channels. So it's essentially a 6-channel setup that has like a sparkly clean Fender to pushed Fender, of course Vox with cleaner sound, and then Vox with a lot of distortion, and then I have like more of a classic rock sound in my Victory Kraken, and then of course the modern rock, heavy rock, metal sound with Kraken as well. Whereas of course with Fractal, I can get options within those places. Like there are a dozen or so Fender choices, and then there are many high gain choices as well. But I'm just very happy with how my tube setup is sounding, that when I'm playing them, I'm not feeling that I need something of a different variation, at least so far. There are of course downsides to playing more traditional rig rather than a digital modern rig that remembers precise settings that you have, and you don't have to worry about it not being the same when you turn it on next time. But all that said, at the end of the day, after I assembled my tube preamp rig, the Fractal is just not being played. Like many players, I have had the tube phases and modeling phases, and of course if I could afford to keep both, I totally could have. But I'm generally not a person who likes to hang on to gear that I'm not playing. And I'm constantly evolving and changing, and generally I don't go back to rig that I used to play with amps. It just the amps that I grew out of, I have fond memories of playing them, but like, do I really want to go back and play those amps? Well, not really. So I am going to sell the Fractal unit and make do with my tube preamp setup. I am excited about living within the limitations of my pedal board, which has still quite a bit of flexibility built into it, but at the end of the day I have 6-ish sort of amp sounds per gig at most. So far I'm not feeling the need for more, and it feels nice to have like my sound. Obviously there's no right or wrong with these kind of things. I reserve my right to change my mind. Who knows, maybe a year from now I'm back to modeling gear. But for now I feel like going from modeling to the tube-based setup feels like an upgrade for me, in that this setup is more demanding, and I have to live with all the details and nuances that comes through this setup, and sort of rise for the occasion and be able to make them sound good. And I feel excited about that challenge, so I think I'm gonna go with that, and rather than letting Fractal just sit as a backup unit that I seldom play, I think I'm gonna let it go. Anyway, I am curious as to what you think. Obviously the tube versus modeling and analog versus digital are fairly well trodden debate at this point, but of course there are many players rely on the reliability and convenience of digital modeling unit now, because it's certainly good enough these days. And on the other hand, there is still some magic in the analog world where that response of tube can get some players excited. And for me, the pendulum is swinging in that direction at the moment. We will see how things will develop in the future. Alright, that's all I have for you today. Thanks again for watching. Let me know what you think in the comment, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.